Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and for those of you that are joining me for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I am an abstract mixed media artist from Pennsylvania. So I've been working in a series of 6" by 12" cradled wooden board mixed media pieces for the last several weeks, and I'm going ahead with today's piece. So this video is basically just a series of things I wish I wouldn't have done and then kind of how I sort of fixed them. I'm not 100% thrilled with the outcome of the final piece, but I decided to go forward with this video anyway because I think it's important to remember, and I say this all the time, but it's just paint and you can always paint over it. And I say it all the time mostly for my own benefit because I have a hard time taking that to heart sometimes as well. But I decided to just keep pushing forward even though I really wanted to quit and start from scratch several times. So we're just going to see it through and I will talk you through what I did here. So I'm doing some collage right now, and if you've watched some of my earlier videos, this is some of my burned paper pieces that I make. I use a wood burner and burn holes in various types of paper and use them as collage material. I'll put some links to those videos at the end if you would like to see examples of this in some of my other work. But the issue that I think I had in this video was I was visited too many times by the good idea fairy, and you know she can be a little bit of a B word sometimes. The problem was I had a lot of ideas, and instead of just picking one and rolling with it, I ended up trying to put them all into one piece, and it wasn't a great idea. I think I pulled something off at the end that is good enough, but I would have been happier had I gone in one of the directions that I used instead of trying to go in all of them, because while all of the ideas were good, valid ideas, they didn't necessarily make a lot of sense together. But again, I'll show you what happened, and you can let me know what you think in the comments. Which direction do you think I should have taken? Do you like where it went? Where would you have stopped or done something different? It's always interesting to get another viewpoint, especially from art-minded folks, and I know a lot of you are. It's kind of like if you went to art school, you survived many critiques, which were sometimes very soul-crushing, but you learn a lot from those. I always said I would much rather hear the critique end of it. I mean, give me some constructive criticism. It's always nice to hear that somebody likes your work, but you grow more with hearing suggestions and maybe directions that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of yourself, and you probably didn't, or you would have taken them. So I'm always very much open to any of that if any of you feel like dropping me a line and telling me what you think. So anyway, what I kind of had in my head, which is kind of should be a hint there because I'm an intuitive artist, I typically don't start with much of an idea or a plan for a piece, but this time I had ideas in my head, which kind of got me in trouble. So my idea here was to create a sort of frame on the outside with the collage paper that I'm using here, and that's what I'm doing right now, is just laying down kind of a frame. My intention was to then use some paint and go over it so that you could still see the texture, but it wasn't just standing out right on top like a collage paper. It became part of the background after I added the paint to it. So the next idea that I had that I thought I probably should, and looking backwards, I'm thinking I should have just saved this for a different piece, was the color scheme that I chose. And I've got a mix here of some Winsor blue, some teal, sap green, Payne's gray, and I think raw sienna. And I'm just kind of going in now with the blue and the Payne's gray to get the darkness around the outside. I also hit that with a little bit of the raw umber because I'm trying to create the darkest points of the piece around the outer edges, and there's a little bit more visual weight at the bottom there. You can see I left a couple of inches of the collage paper versus at the top where I just had a very small amount. So the visual weight is going to be at the bottom of this piece, and that's where I wanted to add the darkest colors also. So basically here for the next few minutes, I'm just going in with all of those different colors and blending and blending. I'm using a variety of brushes and take you in there so that you can see the texture underneath the paint. And I like it, right? It's good so far. I didn't mind it once I added the rest of the paint on either. I thought it was a really cool color combo, especially adding that sap green in and mixing it with the teal. It almost kind of had an oceanic feel to it because you can see the holes in the burn pieces and they kind of put you in mind to bubbles or something like that. Not what I was necessarily going for, but once I put the colors on there, I was like, okay, that's really cool. I could definitely do something with that. And I could have had I gone in a different direction, but you'll see here, it's not what I chose to do for this piece, and I'm kind of wishing that I would have. But I'm going in here a little bit with my color shaper and just moving things around, removing some of the paint from over top of the collage papers, letting a little bit more of the white and the color of the paper, which that paper that I made with the holes in it, I used a piece of a sheet music page out of a hymnal. So it's like book page type paper. It has that color to it. And I was trying to let a little bit of that shine through to see if I liked that better. I ended up covering it all back up with paint again, but it's okay to experiment and play as you go to kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. And maybe you are the kind of artist that plans everything out from the word go, and I know a lot of people like that and they're very successful and have absolutely amazing art. It's just not how I typically work. So I like to experiment and try things out on the fly, kind of just thinking in the moment and going by feel with my pieces. And that typically works for me. And I think that would have worked well for me here too, except I was trying too hard to push an idea that I hadn't really fleshed out because I had a half an idea and just kind of tried to go with it. And that might not have been the best course of action. So now that I've got a lot of the blues and grays down, I'm going in with a little bit more of the blue and really blending it in. I'm trying to get a little more of that richness from that blue. I've got a big fluffy brush there that I use a lot for blending. It works really nicely, especially on a gessoed surface. It really creates these interesting marks and like textural elements that I really like. And you can see there I'm putting a little bit of the sap green down over top of that. And again, it's a great color combination. I really like it and I would definitely use it again. I've used it in other pieces and I've loved it. But I do really like the way that you can see the texture of those collage papers underneath there. I love that you can see them, but they're not just sitting on the surface. I love that the paint is kind of building up inside of the holes because it is dimensional. It is actually three-dimensional, and it's appearing more dimensional that way too because the buildup of the paint is collecting inside of those edges there, and I really like that effect. I just keep going in with more and more layers of paint. I'm definitely the kind of artist that likes to work in layers, both actual layers of collage paper and paint. I like to layer paint on top of layers of paint. It creates an interesting depth that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. And I like playing with different color values in different places. And you can see here I'm going back and forth between that sap green and the blue, mixing in a little bit of the darker colors like the Payne's Gray and the raw sienna there, just to kind of play around with that idea of depth and tonal value without actually changing the color of the paint at all. And I'm really liking where it's going so far with the color. At this point though, I think I decided that the middle needed to be a little bit lighter. So I go in with a little bit of white mixed with some of the teal, and it's not bad, but I'm not loving it, and I end up going in with a little bit of yellow to brighten it up a little bit, which I do like, but largely I end up covering all of that up again because it's not exactly what I was hoping for. I don't know exactly what I was hoping for, but that wasn't it. So I'm going in now with a little more yellow and a little more of that sap green just to kind of warm that back up again, because I think that's what was bugging me about it. The tone was a little too cool, and while I did have some cooler blues in there, I had a lot of the sap green, which was a warmer color, and it was really a garish contrast that was bothering my eye a little bit. So I brought a lot more of that sap green in, and because I had the white underneath and I'm adding in the yellow, it wasn't so much that it was dark like it was before, but it was just a little bit warmer, and I think that made it look more visual appealing to me. It's kind of funny, I've mentioned this before in my videos. While you're in the moment creating the art, you kind of have a tendency to be a little bit too close and not be able to make an accurate judgment of it sometimes. That's why I always recommend, if you're feeling stuck, walk away from it for a little while, even overnight, and a fresh perspective can often really help you. But just going back in and watching this as I'm doing the voiceover here, I see so many spots that I could have stopped or proceeded from there with a little more success, and I didn't, because I was determined to stick to my original idea and make it all fit together, even though it really didn't want to. Like the color combination that I have on there right now, I'm looking at it and I think, wow, that's really cool. I like that a lot. It's just really kind of ethereal. It's got that the beautiful greens and blues with the white and the yellow in there that kind of almost create a misty look to it. And I'm just sitting here thinking, man, I could have really done something to push that idea, but I didn't. But that's okay, because I'm looking at it now and thinking that is definitely an idea that I can push forward another time and maybe make something that I am extremely happy with. But anyway, so here I am going in with the color shaper again. I'm adding a little bit of water to some of the surface paint there, just to try to remove a little bit of it to see if I can get an interesting effect there. And it's creating some cool kind of like foggy effects, like you're looking at something through a mist or through a fog, and I really like the way that looks. And I try to push that a little bit further in some other places, and it kind of works. But I go in and I end up removing a little bit too much paint in a couple places, and you can just see there I'm going in with my blending brush and mixing it all back in, and it's creating kind of an edge you can see over there on the left-hand side of the board, but the right-hand side of where I was just working, and you can see it kind of creates a line, which I do like, and I think that could have been another area that I could have pushed and done that over the whole entire middle section there, and I might have liked that for something. But again, learning things that you don't like and learning things that you do like are very important in creating art, because even if you don't necessarily love the way they work on the piece on which you're currently working, you can take that forward with you and really kind of think about how that might fit into future work if it's an effect that really speaks to you. I cut a little bit of that process out because it was getting a bit redundant, but you get the gist there of what I was doing, and now I'm just going in and blending everything together, and that's where I put it away for a while. So I stepped back for a minute at this point and was trying to figure out where to go next. And I really thought that I wanted more texture than the collage paper was bringing to it. I liked the way it looked, but I wanted it to be pushed a little bit further. And I had this stencil that has a very similar pattern, different sized circles on there as the collage paper that I had made. So I thought I would take some of my modeling paste and go in and just lay in some extra texture there. And it was a little bit tricky because some of the circles started getting smeared from laying the stencil down on top of areas that I just did. But I think all in all, that turned out pretty much like I had wanted it to. Whether or not, excuse me, that was a good choice or not, I'm not sure, because I kind of ended up not really liking it as much as I thought I was going to. But it also didn't make such a difference once I got the paint on it like I'm doing right here. I mean, you'll definitely be able to see it. And I do like what it did to the end piece. It gave me those raised surfaces to add a lighter color on to really pop all of that, which I think was important in the overall success of the piece. But I'm using the same color palette that I did underneath because I want to keep everything pretty consistent. And you're actually not even going to really be able to tell that I did that step after I painted it. Normally, I would lay down modeling paste as one of the first steps. I would either do the modeling paste absolutely first right on top of the gessoed board, or I would lay down a little bit of collage first and then put the modeling paste over that. But there's no right or wrong with that. As you can see here, you can add it at any point in your piece. My recommendation for adding it first, though, is just because you'll be able to blend everything a little more seamlessly. My fear was that it was going to appear as though I plopped it on top, which I did, but I didn't want it to look that way, and it didn't. I was able to really blend everything well enough that I think it was concealed and looked like I had done it from the beginning. So as I'm adding these paint layers and blending everything together, I'm starting to think about where I might want to go next with this, and that to me is trying to figure out what is going to go in this middle portion that I have framed in. And I thought for a while about going in several different directions, but I ultimately ended up going in with some more florals. So in the last couple of videos, I was using these flowers in different ways, and I'm just setting them on there now to get an idea of placement. What my idea was here is to use a little bit of metallic copper paint and do stamps on. My original idea had been to put metallic foil adhesive, like gold leaf adhesive, on the flowers and press them down and then use the copper leaf on there. And I tried it on a piece of paper, and while I really liked it, and I will probably end up using that in the future, I didn't love it necessarily for this particular piece. It didn't give a clear enough impression of the flowers, and you can even see there with the paint. It's not an absolutely perfect impression, and I don't need it to be here because I'm using paint, and I can go in and easily touch up, which I'm going to do here. But it was a little more abstract looking than I wanted for the gold leaf, and I wanted to be able to easily identify these are in fact florals. But I think that gold leaf technique is going to pop up in one of my future pieces. I could see that working really well around the edge as part of a framework, but not necessarily being the centerpiece. Okay, so I am just going in here and smoothing down these flowers with the roller there to get a really nice, to get the best impression that I can get off of it. And as you can see, it didn't fully go down, and that's okay, it's not going to. But I had plenty of paint left over on my little gel plate there, which I just used as a rolling surface, and that I was able to go in with a small brush and just by hand clarify the petals enough so that you can really tell that you're looking at a flower and there's no doubt in your mind. So I took a few minutes here and went in with that brush, redefining these petals in the places that I wanted them to. And while I'm doing this, I'm thinking, is this where I'm going to stop with it? Because it doesn't really feel finished. Or am I going to keep going? And if I am going to keep going, where is that going to take me? I went in to speed up this particular part because it was just a lot of tedium of going over these petals over and over again, and I didn't want to bore you all to tears, so that's why this is so much faster than the rest of it. But after I got these down, I did reach a point where I kind of didn't know what to do, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking this is a really good place to stop and just take some time and really think about it. Although looking back now, I kind of wish that would have been the point where I stopped, because I like it a lot better there than what I ended up doing with the flowers, although it's fine like that too. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's the choice I made, and it all worked out. So I wanted to carry some of that copper down into the texture because it was the perfect surface to actually make that stand out. I had all of those raised bits from the modeling paste that I used, and they're picking up that copper nicely, and it's carrying that color down in and around a little bit better so that it kind of makes a little more sense because of the continuity there. I also thought it might look nice if I added some of the copper around the edge, and I do like the way that turned out. It kind of gives it a vintage feel, and actually the way the texture picks up the paint to kind of pushes that vintage feel. My last piece that I did, it had that on there, and somebody commented that it looked like an old tapestry, and I hadn't thought of it until they said that, and if that was you, thank you, because you were absolutely right. but I'm pushing that forward here too because I really just like the way that that looks. So I actually went ahead and picked up some of that leftover paint that I had on my roller, just using up what I had left, taking it around all of the edges. It is absolutely not perfect, and it doesn't have to be. I wasn't going for that at all. I was just trying not to smear it too much, which I did in a couple places, and as long as your paint is still wet, you can just wipe that up with a wet cloth or wet paper towel, which is exactly what I did. But I really do like the way that that looked outlined there, just with a little bit of the metallic paint there. It almost looked like, you know how some old books have the gold leaf on the edge of the pages? It kind of has that feel to it. So it just pushed the aged and vintage look a little bit more. It was feeling a little bottom heavy because I didn't have any of the gold at the top. So if you remember, I didn't put any of the modeling paste at the top, but I had enough texture coming through from the collage paper that I was able to get a similar look up there. I liked it a little better on the bottom because the paper was thin, obviously, because it's paper, and so it was allowing a little too much of the paint to hit the actual board and kind of smearing and collecting in a way that I didn't really want it to. But after a few attempts there, I got the effect that I was going for, and I think it all worked out just fine. So this is the point where I didn't really love some of the decisions that I made. I decided to go back in with the copper paint and put another layer of petals. And initially it looked pretty good, but then I just kept going with it and it started to become too much. But I was already in it and kind of just had to keep going. So I did, and I was able to mitigate that with some future choices. But if I had it to do again, I would have left that middle flower alone. And after sitting with it for a little while, I thought, well, maybe I can just go in and define the petals with my micron pen. And it started to work, but the pen itself wasn't, I don't know if I didn't let the paint dry enough or if the pack of microns that I had, I got on clearance about a year ago, so they might have actually just been drying up, but I couldn't get them to keep working. And I kept opening fresh ones, and it just, you can see there, I'm tapping it and trying to get it to work. Ultimately, I ended up moving to my black Posca pen, which is an acrylic paint marker, and it's fine, but the tip is much thicker than the micron pen, obviously, because by their very nature, they're a very fine tip, and I did not really love the way that it turned out. I like it at first, and I'm going in there, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, this will work, but I think the line was just a little too thick for my liking, and it would have been better had I had a thinner pen to work with. But it is what it is, and it's the decision that I made. So I ended up outlining the whole entire thing, setting it aside for a while, and when I came back to it, I think the decision that I made worked. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. I hear other artists on YouTube often talk about this, and sometimes we are our own worst critics too, because as I'm sitting here watching this, I don't really dislike it as much as I thought I did as I was making it, and I'm sitting here watching myself paint this piece, and I'm thinking there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine. But I did make the decision to go back in and put a layer of black petals in the center because I thought it just needed to be broken up a little bit. It was maybe just too much copper sitting right there on the surface of the board, and I thought that might be what was bothering me. And I do kind of like the way it looks with the black, although at one point when I was finished, I said to my boyfriend, oh good, I think I have definitely found a way to make this painting even worse. I don't know if I'm going to have a video this week. But then that's kind of when I decided, well, no matter what it turns into, I'm going to put the video out anyway, because all in all, it's a learning process, and it's good to maybe humble myself a little bit by creating something that I'm not 100% happy with, but what can I take away from this and learn? So again, it all ended up fine, and I do like the way that it turned out for the most part. But here I'm just adding a little bit more of the black to the middle of the smaller flowers. I think they needed just a little bit of sprucing up there, something to pull them forward. They were kind of fading into the background a little too much, and that's really not what I was going for. So after doing that and fiddling a lot more with the layer of black in the center of the copper, I had to set it down again and really kind of think hard about where I wanted to go next, because I think after this point was one of the main points where I was thinking, wow, I don't like it. But someone suggested adding a pop of color, and I thought, that is exactly what it needs. I'm going to pull out my favorite Grumbacher red paint and stamp the smaller flower in the center of the black there. And while a lot of the paint didn't transfer over, enough of it did that I could get a nice impression there, and you can kind of see. And I was able to go back in with my brush and add much thicker quantities so that you can really see the petals. And I was very happy with the way that turned out. And once I got the red in the middle flower, I realized that it needed to be carried up into the smaller ones, and I went ahead and just added a little bit of that red in the center of all three, just some red dots there to mimic the natural shape of the flower, and I took that up to the small flower above and the small flower below just to carry the continuity of the color through. And that was really the last kind of choice that I made with this piece. At that point, I decided it was as done as it was going to be. I was going to choose to be happy with it. I was going to put my name on it, and I was going to spray it with my triple thick acrylic spray, which I did, and I'm going to show you the finished piece here in a second. And let me tell you, the triple thick acrylic spray is kind of wonderful because it really brings to life a kind of a flat piece, which was a little visually flatter piece, but that helped a whole lot. I did go in real quick with my Posca here and define some of the leaves, or some of the petals a little bit more on all of the flowers, added a few detail line pieces there, and just kind of emphasized some shadow areas to give it a little bit more realistic shading. And granted, of course, realistic was never what I was going for with this. This was always supposed to be an abstracted floral, because otherwise, wow, that would have been an epic failure. But I do like the way it turned out, and I'm going to show you here in a moment how everything wrapped up. All right, here's the finished piece. I do not have a name yet, but I will soon, and this will be up on my Etsy store hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm not certain it's going to be up there by the time I have this video up. Thank you everyone who has subscribed. This has been a great week for subscribers. You are all awesome. If you haven't had a chance yet, please hit the subscribe button. You might want to hit the bell notifications too, so you know when I put out a video. YouTube doesn't always let people know. And give me a like if you like the video. For those of you who have been following my exhibit schedule, I have the first opening reception this coming Saturday for the Westmoreland Art Nationals. It's the awards ceremony, so fingers crossed. As soon as I have some information on the online exhibit, I will let you all know, and you'll be able to take a look at all of the artwork and vote on your favorite piece. So if that is up before Saturday, I will try to add it to the description in this video as soon as I have it. Otherwise, I will put it in the description of my next video. Thank you all so much for coming on these journeys with me. I really appreciate all of you, and have a great week.